Hello everyone, welcome to Fox and Media Digital. My name's Amy and today I'm joined by Cynthia Ourfalian, who is Business Development for North America at RepRisk. So welcome Cynthia, it's great to have you on the channel. So before we dive into some of the questions, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and RepRisk?
Hi there. So my name is Cynthia and I work at RepRisk. I've been with the firm for a little over 2 years and I sit in the business development team for North America. A quick word on RepRisk. So RepRisk is a pioneer in ESG data science and we provide both qualitative research as well as quantitative data on ESG and business conduct risks. And so we leverage both AI and machine learning together with human intelligence to gather relevant ESG risk information and incidents on companies and projects as reported by public sources and stakeholders like news media, NGOs, and various governmental bodies. Our clients use our data to identify, monitor, and assess ESG risks for their own investments or operations, or it could be for their client or supplier portfolios to help future-proof their investments. So ultimately, our goal is to help stakeholders to make the best financing, investment, and overall business decisions.
Thank you for that introduction. Before we dive into some of those deeper data and risk issues that you currently help your clients with, could you tell us a bit about the current state of play in the ESG space as a whole?
So there's been a big increase in ESG investments in the last few years and a growing integration of ESG data, ratings, and metrics into decision-making, which then supports the way that companies do business. But at the same time, as we all know, there's been backlash around ESG, and a lot of that stems from confusion around what it essentially stands for, what the purpose of ESG is, and the role it can play in directing capital. And one major issue that we often see is that ESG is reduced to carbon emissions. And while that's an important part of the story, it's not the only part because ESG considers business conduct risks across all three pillars. So then we should be clear about the role of investors when it comes to a low carbon economy. While investors can nudge companies in the right direction, like finding ways to optimize production, to reduce emissions, they cannot change the underlying economies of companies. So meaning investors cannot transform a business that by nature is high in emissions to a zero emission economy. That just would require major technological advances. So while ESG data is associated with driving the transition to a low carbon economy, it's important to make a distinction. Climate change and emission reductions cannot be solved by ESG alone, but improving a company's business conduct doesn't really require a fundamental change in its business model. It's simply about doing business responsibly, like avoiding child labor and corruption and adopting sustainable forestry practices. And so this is where ESG data works to shine a light on business conduct risks and ensures that companies are committed to going green or doing the right thing with respect to human rights or responsible sourcing. So essentially that they're walking their talk. And in essence, ESG data can hold companies accountable for their commitments and operating in a responsible manner. So basically, we can conclude that responsible business conduct is not controversial and it should not be seen that way. And while there has been a bit of a retreat around the use of word ESG, the fundamental principles of good business are here to stay.
Very well said, and some great examples there as well to put it into perspective. So speaking of definitions and speaking of distinctions in the terms that we use, can you tell us a bit more about the difference between strategic inside out and outside in approach in ESG data as well?
ESG issues are becoming increasingly important to asset owners, regulators, and investors, and incorporating multiple sources for ESG information supports performance evaluations despite the lack of standardized disclosures, transparent scoring methodology, and consistent data availability. And it's important for investors to have a well-rounded view, and so it's becoming more and more crucial that self-reported data is confirmed by other sources like news articles, government regulatory findings, and reports by non-governmental organizations. And to this end, several data providers apply artificial intelligence technology to analyze these sources and extract meaningful data to incorporate into ESG data metrics, which then, of course, provides an alternative source of information. And so at RepRisk, we've always taken an outside-in approach to ESG risks by analyzing information from public sources and stakeholders and intentionally excluding company self-disclosures. And it's I'd say that now it's pretty much well accepted that self-reported data can mask risks. Also, data from outside sources is most useful when integrated within investment companies' core workflow. And while the completeness and consistency of information is a challenge for all types of ESG data, adding additional perspectives can help fill gaps and provide a more balanced view. And one common approach is to create one or more internal scores, combining multiple data sources to reflect the firm's ESG priorities. And I'd like to note that since RepRisk is not a one-stop shop, we've partnered with various organizations like BlackRock, S&P, and K2 Integrity, to name a few, to provide a well-rounded perspective and to cater to specific use cases and needs.
Interesting. And we're certainly always hearing about the gaps in the data and, what kind of sources people should be using and whether scorecards alone are accurate or if they should be doing other things to supplement their strategies around that and getting those true insights. So you mentioned some of those partnerships. What other kind of innovative solutions are out there? I mean, AI is obviously one of them. Can you tell us a bit more about what options there are out there for investment managers?
Machine learning and AI are valuable for analyzing unstructured data sources like news articles, NGO reports, and government sources to identify emerging trends and risks related to sustainability issues that could affect a company's performance. Other alternative data sources, like satellite data, for example, can provide additional insights into a company's environmental impact and resource usage. And I'd say that local ESG ratings providers are also worth considering. So, for example, a recent study by Kellogg School of Management found that local ESG ratings providers often provide more nuanced context and better assessments, sustainability assessments on companies than global providers do. And this is because they have a better understanding of local contexts and can provide more detailed assessments of companies' impact on local communities as well as the environment. On the other hand, you have private company disclosures that are still all-time low, with only a fraction of private companies actually reporting their sustainability practices. And even those disclosures themselves are minimal. So essentially, based on recent market feedback, if you have anywhere between 20 to 30% disclosures, it's considered quite good. So then you can understand that we have a long way to go. And to this point, essentially, there are solutions out there currently that enable GPs and LPs to access meaningful, performance-based, and comparable sustainability data from private companies. And so by combining data sources like methodologies, analyses, traditional ESG ratings, sentiment analysis, regulatory coverage, and modeling, investors can gain a fuller picture. And I'd like to mention that as companies become more sophisticated in creating their own sustainability scores and metrics, I think we're going to start to see a shift away from traditional ESG ratings providers. And combining data from multiple sources is important for investors who want a comprehensive understanding of a company's sustainability practices. And ultimately, investors need to be able to assess a company's sustainability practices in a way that's meaningful, comparable, and performance-based.
Thinking about getting that comprehensive view as well, I know that it's much more tricky for biodiversity, for example, than it is with climate change to measure the data, and there are so many data gaps there. And thinking about it from a thematic point of view, how should investors incorporate biodiversity risk into their portfolio? Why does it matter? And how can these solutions help them with that?
Biodiversity risk is financial risk, and financial market practitioners require some biodiversity risk data to assess business conduct of companies, understand how they interface with nature, and make meaningful progress toward nature-related targets, as well as compliance with international standards. And as we know, companies right now are coming under a lot of scrutiny, where regulators are intensifying their focus on destruction of ecosystems. And then also we have the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures, developing a standard framework to report related risks. So investors inevitably will be encouraged or even mandated to integrate biodiversity loss into their portfolio decisions. And so, as we know, nature doesn't really care about environmental pledges, nor does it disclose risks. And with that in mind, RepRisk teamed up with IBAT, which stands for Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool, to create the world's most powerful biodiversity due diligence tool, where we provide biodiversity risk analytics that can be used for financial decision-making processes. And RepRisk Geospatial offers a first-of-its-kind solution to biodiversity risk assessment, linking projects and the companies that own or operate them to environmentally sensitive sites based on their proximity. And it currently provides proximity insights for over 65,000 extractive sector projects located near over 300,000 environmentally sensitive sites. And new research exploring our data came up with some interesting statistics. So extractive infrastructure projects within 1 kilometer of an environmentally sensitive site experience 30% more environmental risk incidents than those more than 30 kilometers away. And ownership or operation of a project within 1 kilometer of an environmentally sensitive site was found to have a significant effect on the environmental risk of a company, regardless whether they were a private company or a public company, where there was a 77% increase in risk incidents for public companies and a 27% increase for private companies. Now, why is this important? Well, because biodiversity loss and related impacts are often viewed as indirect risks, but association with these issues has serious reputational implications for businesses today. And so now we may think that these risk incidents at the company level aren't necessarily linked to individual projects, but the research finding could serve as a guide that companies associated with projects with known proximity risk tend to have higher environmental risk exposure overall. So owning or operating one of these geospatially high-risk projects could serve as a red flag that the company is A, failing to manage environmental risks, and B, point to a wider environmental negligence. So in conclusion, RepRisk Geospatial indicates that proximity does matter, where the operation of an extractive project within the immediate range of an environmentally sensitive site is associated with significantly greater environmental risk. So for investors and companies who own, finance, and invest in extractive projects, these results can guide their decision to steer clear from the riskiest project placements, and this, of course, will then reduce damage to nature and to their bottom line. And so this general guidance, together with detailed project and company-specific business conduct risk data, can support due diligence processes and shape investment decisions.
Very interesting to have those really tangible examples of the on-the-ground impact of, projects. I think, when you think about measuring these issues in the data, investors often don't know where to start, but I think putting it into those terms, it really does shine a light on how much there is there that can be used in research. So it's great that you have the tools and technology to be able to do that and help the finance community on their way with this. Thank you so much for giving us a good overview of all of these key issues and how RepRisk is helping tackle them. We're looking forward to partnering with you at our future events, and of course, hopefully we'll have some of these discussions again and see where we're at in the coming year.
Thanks, Amy. I look forward to it too.
And thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to follow our YouTube channel for more content on challenges and opportunities in asset management, wealth management, and ESG. And don't forget to give this interview a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button.